What if I told you that in the week before Chris Watts murdered his family, he Googled, "Can you dissolve a body with lye?" What if I told you that his 4-year-old daughter Bella watched him load her dead mother into his truck and asked, "What are you doing with mommy?" What if I told you that the confession that made headlines around the world was actually a lie designed to make Chris look like a victim?
Shanann, Bella, Celeste, if you're out there, just come back. Like, if somebody has her, just please bring her back. I need to see everybody. I need to see everybody again. This house is not complete without anybody here. Please bring her back.
The Chris Watts case captured global attention in August 2018, becoming one of the most widely covered family annihilation cases in recent history. The story dominated headlines, spawned countless documentaries, podcasts, and true crime discussions. But if you think you already know this case, you almost certainly will end this documentary with a new perspective on what really happened in Frederick, Colorado. Because the story you heard in the media, the family man who snapped under pressure, the crime of passion that destroyed a perfect family, that's not what happened at all. The information you're about to hear comes exclusively from official court documents, police interrogation footage, FBI behavioral analysis reports, and sworn testimony. No speculation, no tabloid theories, just the facts that were buried beneath the media frenzy. But this isn't just another retelling of a tragic crime. This is an examination of how a case that seemed solved from day one was actually far more complex than anyone realized. Let's start with what everyone thought they knew. Christopher Lee Watts and Shanann Watts met in 2010. By all outward appearances, they built the American dream in Frederick, Colorado. Chris worked in the oil fields for Anadarko Petroleum. Shanann sold health supplements for a multi-level marketing company called Lavelle, promoting their Thrive products with endless enthusiasm. Their social media presence painted a picture of domestic bliss. 2 daughters, 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste, nicknamed CC. In 2018, Shanann was pregnant with their 3rd child, a boy they planned to name Nico. Picture-perfect family photos, vacation snapshots, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, the kind of life that makes you scroll through Facebook with a touch of envy.
Tell me you love them.
You love them. We love you.
But court documents reveal a drastically different story beneath those Instagram filters and Facebook posts. Financial records entered as evidence show the family was drowning in debt. Their mortgage was behind by thousands of dollars. Credit cards were maxed out. The bankruptcy filing from 2015 had provided only temporary relief. They were 3 months away from losing their home. But here's the thing. According to the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, financial stress alone doesn't explain what happened next. Plenty of families face financial ruin without it ending in murder. There was something else, something the initial media coverage largely overlooked. In June 2018, just 2 months before the murders, Chris Watts began an affair with co-worker Nicole Kessinger. Phone records show they exchanged over 1,000 text messages in the weeks leading up to August 13th. But here's what most people don't know. According to digital forensics evidence, this wasn't just an affair. Chris had begun completely compartmentalizing his life. To Nicole, he presented himself as a man whose marriage was essentially over. Someone ready for a fresh start. He told her he was separated, that divorce papers were already filed, that his wife was moving out. None of this was true, but in Chris's mind it seems he had already erased his family from his future. Now let's talk about August 13th, 2018, the day that changed everything. 5:17 a.m. Security cameras capture Chris Watts loading his truck and leaving for what he claimed was a normal day at work. But FBI analysis of his phone GPS data tells a completely different story. His phone's GPS shows he didn't go directly to the Survey 319 oil site where he claimed to be working. Instead, there's a 45-minute gap in his location data. a digital dead zone that investigators believe shows he deliberately disabled his phone's location services. Why would someone disable their phone's GPS on what was supposed to be a routine workday? The answer would become clear later. When Shanann's friend, Nicole Atkinson, couldn't reach her that afternoon, she immediately knew something was wrong.
Can't get a hold of her. I've called, I've texted. Her car's in the garage, her shoes she wears every single day are by the front door.
Shanann was obsessive about communication. She answered texts within minutes. She never went anywhere without telling someone. When hours passed with no response, Nicole called police for a welfare check. Body camera footage from that initial police visit shows Chris's demeanor, and even without training in behavioral analysis, something feels off.
I've got some of these. Okay. Want to talk before we go?
What about bank account checking into that? Do we need account numbers or anything, or have him call?
Yeah, find any credit cards. That's why I was asking about the credit cards if there are any missing, but none of yours are missing either.
Cash? She usually carry cash with her, or no?
Cash I gave her yesterday
Still in there?
Okay.
Because I paid her for the hotel because on the card and I paid her half full.
Okay. Okay. Well, I got your numbers, so I'll be in touch. Maybe one of us will be in touch. I will go things like this. We got it. There's some things we have to do before we go just flat out missing person. Stuff to do.
Is it good or bad that you know my son? I just have to ask.
I know everyone.
You know the
Comes with the job.
Yeah. Good or bad?
No, he's not bad. He's friendly.
Well, good or bad, I get to contact everyone eventually.
Okay.
So if it does go missing first, would we like set up like a commands? I'm not sure like how that works.
No, actually it's really not that.
Okay, I didn't know.
Yeah, it's really not like that. What it'll be is a new computer system, so when she pops up somewhere, and then on top, everybody looking around, asking around. So really what it is we're going to go back and do now will be part of that process, the missing persons process, is because we want to find out where she at if the kiddo was involved.
Yeah.
Too. So they definitely want to run that part of it.
Is this a pretty current picture?
No,
No?
I've got one.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and
Okay.
their Facebook is full.
Okay.
Behavioral analysts later noted several red flags in this initial interaction. Chris's voice pitch elevated when discussing the timeline. He touched his neck frequently, a classic stress indicator. Most telling, he showed absolutely no curiosity about where his family might be. Think about that for a moment. Your pregnant wife and 2 young children are missing. Wouldn't your first instinct be to call everyone you know, to check hospitals, to drive around the neighborhood looking for them? Instead, Chris stood calmly in his doorway, offering simple explanations while police searched his house. But the real breakthrough came not from his words, but from what investigators discovered at the oil site. At the Survey 319 site, investigators found something that changed everything. GPS data from Chris's work truck showed he had made multiple trips to different oil battery locations that morning. Not just one, as he claimed. More damning, the truck's GPS showed he spent 47 minutes at the site, far longer than needed for routine maintenance checks that typically took 10 to 15 minutes. What was he doing for 47 minutes at a remote oil site where he claimed to be conducting routine checks? This is where the case took an unexpected turn. Chris's initial story began to crumble, but not in the way anyone expected. On August 15th, Chris agreed to take a polygraph test. He failed it decisively. But what happened next reveals the most overlooked aspect of this entire case. Faced with the failed polygraph, Chris finally confessed. But his first confession was almost as shocking as the crime itself. He blamed Shanann for killing the children. He claimed he killed her in a rage after discovering what she had done. She hurt them, and then I freaked out and I hurt her, he told investigators. This story dominated headlines for hours. A mother who snapped and killed her children, then was killed by her husband in a moment of rage. It seemed to make sense. Postpartum depression, financial stress, family breakdown. But FBI profilers immediately recognized something crucial that the media completely missed. According to the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit report, Chris's confession contained specific linguistic markers that screamed deception. The use of passive voice when describing the children's deaths, the placement of blame on the victim, the portrayal of himself as a secondary victim rather than the perpetrator. These weren't random lies told in panic, they were calculated deflections. Dr. Lena Frank, the FBI's lead behavioral analyst on the case, noted in her report that family annihilators typically follow one of two patterns. They either confess immediately and completely, consumed by guilt, or they create elaborate false narratives that portray themselves as victims of circumstance. Chris chose the latter, and it revealed something chilling about his psychology. The real confession came weeks later, during a prison interview with investigators, and it revealed something no one was prepared for. Chris admitted he killed Shanann first, in their bedroom, while she slept. He strangled her with his bare hands. But then came the detail that investigators say haunts them to this day. 4-year-old Bella witnessed her father loading her mother's body into his truck. She asked, "What are you doing with Mommy?" Can you imagine? A 4-year-old child watching her father load her dead mother into a truck, asking an innocent question that no child should ever have to ask. According to Chris's final confession, both children were alive when he drove them to the oil site. What happened next represents one of the most disturbing aspects of this case. Chris admitted that he killed both children at the oil site, then disposed of their bodies by pushing them through the 8-inch hatches of oil storage tanks. Think about that for a moment. These tanks had openings barely wide enough for a small child's body. Bella and Cece's bodies were found submerged in crude oil 4 days later. Shanann's body was buried in a shallow grave nearby. The logistics of this disposal method reveal the calculated nature of Chris's actions. The oil tanks weren't chosen randomly. He knew they would be difficult to search and would contaminate evidence. This wasn't a panicked attempt to hide bodies, this was methodical planning. But the psychological evaluation conducted after his confession revealed something that changes how we completely understand this case. Court-ordered evaluations by forensic psychologists revealed personality markers that had been building for years. Chris Watts tested high for covert narcissism and what psychologists call annihilator traits, the ability to compartmentalize victims as obstacles rather than human beings. But here's what the media coverage completely missed. This wasn't a man who suddenly snapped. This was a methodical psychological progression that had been building for months, possibly years. Text messages between Chris and Nicole Kessinger, released in discovery documents but largely overlooked by mainstream media, show Chris discussing his new life and fresh start weeks before the murders. In one message, he told Kessinger he was going to fix everything and that she wouldn't have to worry about complications much longer. What did he mean by complications? His family. Financial forensics revealed that Chris had been researching the cash value of Shanann's life insurance policy. Browser history from his work computer showed searches for dissolution of marriage in Colorado and how long does divorce take in Colorado. But the most chilling discovery came from his internet search history in the week before the murders. Searches included battery acid disposal, how long does decomposition take, and can you dissolve a body with lye? These weren't the searches of someone planning to file for divorce. These were the searches of someone planning murder. As one detective put it, this wasn't a crime of passion. This was premeditated. The searches, the insurance inquiries, the affair timeline, it all points to someone who had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. The FBI's final report concluded that Chris Watts exhibited classic signs of what they term family annihilator syndrome, but with a twist that makes this case unique in criminal psychology. Most family annihilators are driven by desperation, seeing murder-suicide as their only escape from financial or personal ruin. Chris was different. He saw murder as a pathway to a better life. Today, Chris Watts is serving life without parole at Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin. In recent interviews, he maintains that his confessions are complete and accurate, but investigators believe there are still unanswered questions. Why was Shanann's purse found in a different location than initially reported? Why did Chris's phone show a deleted text conversation from the morning of August 13th? Why were there cleaning supplies found in his truck that weren't part of his normal work equipment? Shanann's family continues to seek answers. Her parents, Frank and Sandra Ruchek, have stated publicly that they believe Chris hasn't told the complete truth about that morning. They believe there are details he's still hiding. But perhaps the most important question isn't what Chris is still hiding, but how someone can compartmentalize human lives so completely that murder becomes a logical solution to life's problems. The Chris Watts case became a media sensation because it seemed to have clear answers. A family man who snapped under pressure. A perfect family destroyed in a moment of rage. But the truth, as revealed in thousands of pages of court documents and FBI analysis, tells a very different story. This was the methodical destruction of a family by someone who had systematically dehumanized them in his own mind. They weren't people to Chris anymore. They were obstacles to the life he wanted with someone else. The case of Chris Watts isn't just about one man's horrific crimes. It's about how someone can live such a complete double life that even those closest to them never see the warning signs. It's about how social media can create facades so convincing that they fool everyone, including the people living behind them. It's about how ordinary-seeming people can harbor thoughts and capabilities that most of us can't even imagine. Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico Watts were more than victims of a crime that captured headlines. Shanann was a mother who worked tirelessly for her family's future, posting videos at 2 a.m. to build her business so she could provide for her children. Bella was a bright 4-year-old who loved to read and asked endless questions about everything. Cece was a spirited 3-year-old who danced to music only she could hear and made everyone around her smile. Their story deserves to be remembered, not for the man who took their lives, but for the lives they lived and the love they brought to everyone who knew them. Because in the end, that's what matters, not the headlines or the true crime podcasts or the Netflix documentaries. The love they shared, the joy they brought to the world, and the reminder that behind every sensational crime story are real people whose lives were cut tragically short. That's the perspective we should carry with us when we think about this case. Not fascination with the killer, but remembrance of the victims. Not obsession with the how and why of the crime, but celebration of the lives that were lost. Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico deserved so much better than the ending they received. They deserved to grow up, to achieve their dreams, to live full and happy lives. That's what we should remember when we think about the Chris Watts case. Not the man who destroyed them, but the family who loved each other until the very end.